The midday sun beat mercilessly, and anyone caught under its rays could easily suffer from heat stroke. But the dark-skinned city dwellers armed themselves with hats or bandanas and a bottle of cool water by this time of day. Despite their lively and active demeanor, they all became equally exhausted by midday. And if the opportunity arose, everyone sought to head to Lopez Mendez. It was a relatively secluded beach where one could enjoy tranquility and wade out the midday heat in the crystal-clear water with an emerald hue, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. Guillermo stepped out from an alleyway and glanced around. He was a 16-year-old mestizo of slender build, like most residents of this small town. He wore a worn-out t-shirt and gray shorts, indicating his origins from a disadvantaged area, perhaps even from a similarly disadvantaged family. He looked around in the hope of meeting someone familiar. "Andrea, have you heard the new awesome song by Mandillo?" "Oh, yes. It's absolutely fantastic. I love his music. Have you been invited to Carlos's party this Saturday?" The conversation between the two attractive half-naked girls, who had passed him by in a half-step, was no longer audible to Guillermo. But he could distinctly sense the pleasant feminine scent, and male fantasies began to play in his head. A minute later, he snapped out of it and started scanning the crowd for his friends again. As luck would have it, there wasn't a familiar face around. It was the perfect time to take a walk with a group along the sandy coastline and dive into the cool sea. Finding no one, he headed there alone. The hot sand scorched his bare feet, and the guy hurried to the sea to cool down his overheated body. On the way, he took off his t-shirt and, without removing his shorts, plunged into the pleasant coolness. Only here and now could one truly feel like a momentarily happy person. The midday heat dulled all senses and desires, and only the seawater could restore clarity to the mind and sharpness to consciousness. What bliss! These feelings and words merged together in Guillermo's mind. He immersed himself in his thoughts and remembered two fiery mestizas he had met in town today. "Guillermo, buddy, what are you doing here?" Guillermo opened his eyes and saw Carlos, his longtime friend, in front of him. So long time that he couldn't even recall the circumstances of their acquaintance. "Probably the same thing as you, escaping the heat." "Yes, it's been quite a day," Carlos replied, wiping the sweat off his wet face with his right hand. He appeared to be roughly the same age as Guillermo, equally sun-kissed and, judging by the wear on his clothes, not well off. Both of them resided in the favelas, a slum district perched on the hillside. The shacks, stacked one atop another, formed a dense cluster. Built from whatever materials could be scavenged, they vaguely resembled dwellings. Devoid of windows and furniture, a pile of old rags served as the bed, resting directly on the earthen floor. Each shack could accommodate up to 10 people. The only thing uniting these individuals was shared lodgings. In the evening, they gathered here to sleep. And in the morning, without exchanging a single word, they dispersed to attend to their own affairs known only to them. But let's return to the beach, where Guillermo met his longtime friend and comrade. "Just an ordinary day today." "Nothing special," Guillermo replied. "What's new?" "It's been a while since we've seen each other." "Where have you been hiding?" "Yeah, there was a little adventure." Guillermo was one of those who had to survive alone in this cruel world. His parents had abandoned him when he was still a child. They were either thieves or drug dealers. But one thing was clear, they were connected to the criminal world. As for their current whereabouts, Guillermo had no idea. They might be dead, or perhaps rotting away in some Mexican or Venezuelan prison. He wasn't interested. He hadn't received anything from them that could tie him to them in any way. In search of sustenance, Guillermo joined a gang that specialized in theft. And in school, he learned just enough to count money. "Guillermo, education will help you make something of yourself," he regularly heard from his teachers. And not without reason. He was a clever boy who could effortlessly solve complex arithmetic problems. But for a life of crime, this was more than enough. So he decided not to waste time on what seemed pointless to him back then, sitting in school. And he ventured into the adventurous world of crime. The criminal world was an integral part of the city. It seemed like half of its population consisted of thieves, and the other half consisted of police officers hunting them down. Every day, in some remote district of the favelas or even in the city center of Panama, serious crimes occurred, from muggings to the murder of a drug dealer. So evening strolls, even in prestigious neighborhoods, could cost lives. Affluent citizens preferred to move around only by car during these times, while the less affluent spent their evenings at home. Theft in small grocery stores or boutiques, of which there were a huge number, was perhaps one of the favorite ways for local hooligans to make a living. It was for this reason that Guillermo ended up in a juvenile detention center along with others like him. But he didn't stay here for more than 6 months. "Hey, kid, why are you walking like you're half dead?" After these words, the counselor deftly struck Guillermo on the back as he walked behind him. The sparks flew from the boy's eyes, and his scratched back hurt even more. If in ordinary life he would have retaliated, here he had to endure and suffer all the torment. And if a teenager showed his weakness, he got it even more often. The counselors, who were supposed to work on correcting the teenagers, made them even angrier. And the perpetually dissatisfied director never let go of the whip, which he used on anyone who happened to be at hand. Teachers in the classrooms used canes for the slightest misbehavior. And everyone had bloated stomachs from the cafeteria food, and they were constantly nauseous. Somehow this information leaked to the newspaper, and an article titled "Yes, It's True" was published. After which, a local padre, under the guise of a pilgrim, visited this detention center and saw for himself that it absolutely did not fulfill its assigned tasks. Here is the translation into English. This became a reason to disband it. It was here that Guillermo spent his last 6 months, as he detailed to his comrade Carlos. "Yeah, I don't envy you. But now, freedom. Live, enjoy. Love the girls. By the way, look at those 2 beauties." Carlos pointed to 2 girls lying on towels under the scorching sun about 20 meters away. The beach was deserted at this time, so the young people could carefully examine them. They were wearing revealing swimsuits. It was evident that their fair skin was completely unaccustomed to the southern sun. One girl in a similarly light swimsuit, like herself, lay on her back, while the other carefully applied sunscreen along her shoulders. Then she began to descend down her back to her buttocks. 2 young men, one of whom had been desperately craving female affection for the past 6 months, watched all this attentively. Europeans. Yeah, most likely. Tourists? I don't think so. I think they come here often. Tourists prefer crowded beaches like Copacabana or Musada. They probably don't know about these remote ones. Yeah, I guess you're right. Locals. Probably some rich girls. Which one do you like more? Carlos glanced questioningly at Guillermo. Are you kidding? They wouldn't even let us within 10 meters of them. Wanna bet that within 5 minutes of meeting them, I'll know their names? You're a fool, Carlos. Why do you even want to bother with rich kids? Wanna bet? His companion persisted. Damn it. What are we betting on? 2 bottles of cold beer, and I don't care where you get them, but they have to be in my hands in 5 minutes. Deal. And the guys slapped each other's palms, as they usually do when making a bet. Guillermo was indeed very taken with the Snow-White Beauty, and he was already imagining their introduction in his head. At that moment, Carlos pulled him by the hand straight to the subject of their bet. The girls, seeing that unfamiliar guys were approaching them, were not at all embarrassed. On the contrary, they seemed almost expectant of being noticed. Victoria and Isabella, those were the girls' names. They appeared to be around 18. From their well-groomed appearance, one could guess that the señoritas were not from simple families. Victoria was the very Snow-White Beauty. Her light curls were neatly gathered and hidden under a small red hat, which was supposed to protect its owner from the sun. And her fair skin seemed almost translucent in the sunlight. Her green eyes showed genuine interest in the approaching young men. Isabella, apparently, had mixed heritage. Her skin was more tanned, and her black hair and dark eyes revealed her to be more of a local than a newcomer. But both of them were lovely. "Hi. I'm Carlos. And this is my friend Guillermo." "I'm Victoria, and this is Isabella," the blonde beauty replied immediately, without a hint of shyness. Guillermo felt butterflies fluttering in his stomach at that moment, but they vanished when he remembered that he needed to get cold beer for Carlos right away. "Would you like something to drink?" Carlos took the initiative, as promised. "With pleasure. But there are no bars on this beach. So, we'll have to meet again somewhere," Victoria replied. Such a turn of events surprised and delighted the teenagers at the same time. It was clear that the girls were open to communication with them. "Then let's meet tonight at Botafogo. There are plenty of bars there, so we'll have a wide selection of drinks." Botafogo is the most popular place in the city, where there are always a lot of people in the evenings. Both locals and tourists come here to spend the evening in one of the numerous cafes or bars. Here you can enjoy exquisite wines as well as inexpensive beer. It's a favorite spot for the local youth. "Carlos, I understand that you're the hero of the day and all that. But what are we going to do tonight? Wouldn't you like to take our new acquaintances to a second-rate bar where they serve watered-down beer?" "You offend me, compadre. Carlos has everything planned. We recently raided one of the mansions of the local rich, so a beautiful evening is guaranteed for us." "Each hour doesn't make it any easier," sighed Guillermo. After the stint in the colony, he firmly decided to break ties with the criminal world. The guy stood out from all the thieves not only with his intellect, but also with his determination. He had long realized that he had outgrown the gang of reckless criminals who stopped at nothing. Though he still vaguely envisioned what he would do. It was as if he was waiting for something or someone to guide him in the right direction. As evening descended on the city, the young people gathered at the appointed place. It was a fountain in the very center of the square. During the day, it became the center of attraction for all the townsfolk. Older people sat on its edge to rest, children loved to frolic under its splashes, and numerous tourists took photos to capture this place not only in their memories. In the evening, the fountain became the favorite spot for young people. The bright illumination that lit up at this time of day gave it a romantic yet mysterious look. It added emotions and even more overflowed young hearts with feelings bursting at the seams. Guillermo and Carlos, as true men, arrived slightly earlier than the appointed time. "Do you think they'll come?" Guillermo asked. "Of course, they will. Haven't you forgotten how Victoria looked at you?" "She's clearly into you," Carlos replied. "Well, you're one to talk," Guillermo blushed. Sure, he had experience interacting with girls and even women. But they were from his own circle. Victoria was from a completely different circle, and he didn't know how to behave or what to say in her presence. Engrossed in their conversation, they didn't notice their morning acquaintances approaching them from behind. "You're already here? And we thought we'd beat you to it," Victoria said, examining the guys with interest. Like on the beach, they were wearing shorts and t-shirts. Their appearance slightly surprised her, but she didn't show it. The girls were wearing beautiful cocktail dresses and fashionable high-heeled shoes. Their hair was neatly done. "Where would you like to spend tonight, handsome?" Carlos asked. "I prefer Café Torres," replied Isabella. "We often come here with my parents. It's very cozy, with delicious food and pleasant service." Everyone nodded approvingly at her suggestion and headed in the chosen direction. "They make excellent churrasco here. And as for their drinks, I'd prefer a Jabatacuba cocktail. Well, or at least a caipirinha. After all, I'm already of legal age," Victoria, who had also been here before, supported her friend's suggestion. But on this evening, no one remembered the tasty dishes. The girls were animatedly sharing stories from their lives. They had been childhood friends, and they shared numerous childhood adventures. To Carlos and Guillermo, these stories seemed so innocent and pure that they dared not interrupt. "Isabella, do you remember when the boys tried to kiss you at school? They would ambush you somewhere around the corner to sneak a kiss when you walked by. Isabella blushed, but her embarrassment quickly turned into girlish laughter. Yes, the girls were pure and innocent at their 18 years. Their upbringing and noble bloodline showed. Carlos and Guillermo had nothing to boast about. They couldn't speak of their criminal life and thievery, although they probably had more life experience. Why are you so quiet? Don't you have any interesting stories? Guillermo tried to deflect. From the outside, it did seem a bit strange. Usually, young men, when entertaining girls, try to captivate their attention all evening. But not this time. Guillermo and Carlos seemed to be in a completely different world. Everything here was different: the manners, the appearance, the conversation topics. And to avoid ruining the evening, they preferred to stay silent, smiling in response to the girls' jokes. The girls, on the other hand, were completely uninhibited. No one scolded them if they suddenly burst into loud laughter. No one controlled every word they said. They seemed to have broken free, something they had never experienced before. And it made their heads spin with the rush of emotions and feelings. It was evident that they had absolutely no experience in dealing with men. "Shall we meet tomorrow?" Victoria looked questioningly at Guillermo as they said goodbye at the gates of her house. It was a 2-story mansion in a prestigious area of the city. He had been in similar houses before, back when he was living a life of crime. Guillermo could imagine what might be inside: exquisite furniture, expensive paintings, antiques, and much more that could attract the attention of an experienced burglar. But now he was in a completely different role, a young man in love, overwhelmed with infinite attraction to this beautiful blonde girl. "Of course, we'll meet," Guillermo replied. They looked at each other, and in their eyes, there was so much excitement and tenderness that it became clear their feelings were mutual. Meanwhile, Isabel agreed to accompany Carlos. But not because he was attracted to the dark-haired beauty. Girls were of absolutely secondary importance to him. And his goal was different from Guillermo's. Love hadn't reached him yet, but curiosity was driving him. He couldn't wait to find out which house and which neighborhood Isabel's family lived in. It turned out they lived right in the city center of Panama, in a 2-story mansion made of white stone. In front of the house, there was a luxurious garden with bananas, oranges, and coconut palms, a standard set for this area. The young people settled on one of the nearby benches. "Isabel, will you treat me to a coconut? Isn't it too late for you?" Isabel tried to brush off her companion, but in reality, she didn't want to part with him. It was quiet in the garden, so no one could disturb their conversation. All the household members had long been asleep. "No, I don't want to leave you," Carlos fibbed. In reality, he wanted to get a better look at the house and find out about her family's wealth. Unsuspecting Isabel began to describe her home in minute detail. Carlos found out that there was a lot of antiques in it, as her father was a passionate collector. Many relics and valuable items inherited from ancestors, such as her grandmother's diamond earrings, a sapphire necklace, and much more. All that remained for Carlos was to find out where the valuables were kept. But even that wasn't a huge challenge. Unsuspecting Isabel told him everything he was interested in. The next day, armed with the necessary information, the guy headed to the thieves' den, the place where Paulinho, the leader of their gang, lived. "Paulinho, I know where we can make some good loot," Carlos joyfully informed him. Paulinho and Carlos had long been rivals in the struggle for the right to be called the leader. Paulinho was slightly older and naturally more experienced than the 16-year-old Carlos. So the palm of primacy went to him. Carlos didn't object, understanding that Paulinho was older and, therefore, more experienced. The whole gang consisted of hardened thugs who didn't hesitate to do anything in their thieving business. They could rob an elderly woman, taking her last coins. "I found out about a juicy spot right in the city center. True, it's surrounded by a 3-meter fence, and entry is only by fingerprint," Carlos said indifferently. "What can we get there?" Paulinho asked. He was a tall, dark-haired young man, about 20 to 25 years old. But in his short life, he had managed to gain authority in his circles. He was respected and, at the same time, feared. with antiques. The leader's eyes suddenly gleamed, and interest appeared on his face. Well, go on. The owner collects antique items, and the house is full of family treasures. I hope you found out when the owners leave the house and if they have any servants? Paulino already had a plan for the upcoming crime. You offend me, compadre. Of course, I found out. The owners leave for their affairs around 10, and at that time only the servants remain in the house. How many of them? A maid, a gardener, a cook, and a manager. Yes, quite a few. I'll take care of the manager. I'll distract him with talks about buying the house. The cook goes straight to the market for groceries after the owners leave. The maid starts cleaning the rooms, added Carlos. We need to involve someone else. Do you have a reliable person? I think I'll find someone. At that moment, Carlos remembered Guillermo. Guillermo arrived at the familiar beach much earlier than they agreed to meet Victoria. He couldn't wait to see her again, and without waiting for the appointed time, he was already there. He sat on the sand, lost in thought. He glanced at the vast sea, waves bringing back memories of their first meeting. His heart beat so hard that it seemed it could break from the emotions that overwhelmed him every time he saw Victoria. He fell in love with her at first sight. Her smile lit up his world. But despite the feelings, there was something that always stood between them like an insurmountable barrier: social inequality. Victoria's world was filled with luxury and privileges he could only dream of. This inequality created a gap between them that he couldn't overcome, despite his strong feelings for her. He rose from the sand and began to walk slowly along the shore, thinking about how easy it would be to stay with her, forget all the restrictions, and just be together. But reality always returned, heavy and inexorable. There you are. And here I am looking for you. Carlos appeared out of nowhere. What happened? There's business, Guillermo. If you're talking about knocking someone off, I already told you I'm out. Guillermo, this will truly be your last time, because it will set you up for the rest of your days. Despite his promise to himself not to return to his former life, Guillermo was intrigued by the offer. If it meant he would have the means to be with Victoria thereafter, he couldn't pass it up. Yes, let this be my last time, thought Guillermo, nodding affirmatively to Carlos. However, Carlos hadn't informed him whose house they were planning to rob with their gang of thieves. But Guillermo wasn't concerned about that at the moment. It was approaching 10 o'clock when the group of young people approached Isabella's house. Carlos and Guillermo stayed in the shadows, waiting around the corner. Paulino, accompanied by another accomplice named Jose, approached the tall gates and knocked on the door. What do you want, sir? The owners aren't home, responded the manager, who appeared from behind the gate. He was a tall man in a pristine white shirt. I'm here about the sale of the house. The owners told me I could inspect it. I haven't received any instructions, the man said, surprised. Of course, you're just to help. The master doesn't need to inform you of his intentions. The man in the white shirt was a bit taken aback. Yes, he was used to such treatment, so he couldn't argue with the stranger. The house was indeed for sale, and Paulino looked like a wealthy gentleman. He was dressed in a black suit and expensive shoes. The manager opened the gates and allowed the stranger to enter the garden. Jose followed Paulino inside. He's the appraiser, Paulino said, gesturing towards the manager. The partners stopped in the middle of the garden and looked around. Yes, the place was truly magnificent. Smooth paths led to the two-story mansion, lined with well-kept shrubs. A short man in uniform was busy in the garden, meticulously trimming leaves that disrupted the geometric perfection of a bush shaped like a sphere. He won't be a problem for us, thought Paulino. Together with Jose, they headed towards the house along the smooth paths. The manager walked ahead, without asking any unnecessary questions. Entering the mansion, they found themselves in a spacious hall. White leather furniture adorned the space. Beyond was the living room, featuring a long, equally pristine white table amidst countless chairs. It was evident that guests were often entertained here. "Where shall we begin our inspection?" the manager inquired, looking at Paulinho questioningly, as Jose remained silent throughout. "And who else is in the house, if you say there are no owners?" Paulinho asked the unsuspecting manager. "The maid is tidying up the rooms. She won't bother you." "Let's go upstairs and start with the master bedrooms," Paulinho suggested. As an experienced burglar, he assumed this would be where many valuable items were kept. Meanwhile, Jose typed a message on the old push-button phone to alert Carlos and Guillermo about the upcoming burglary. They had ropes and all the necessary gear to scale the fence. Jose specified the gardener's current whereabouts in the message. Carlos and Guillermo stealthily made their way toward the house along the bushes to remain unnoticed. They concealed themselves in the garage, whose gates were open. Carlos had previously learned that it provided a passage into the house. Here, they would wait for the signal. Upon receiving the signal, Paulinho was to send another message to his partners, indicating it was time to begin. Paulinho and Jose exited the owner's room along with the manager, followed by the maid. She was about to clean Isabella and Mateus's rooms. At that very moment, Paulinho signaled to Jose, who discreetly sent a message, "The owner's room is clear. Proceed." Following this, the accomplices covertly entered the house through the garage. Meanwhile, Paulinho, Jose, the manager, and the maid were inspecting Isabella's room. Unnoticed, Guillermo and Carlos ascended to the second floor and entered the owner's room. Yes, there was plenty to loot. Paintings by unknown artists adorned the walls. "These must be expensive," Guillermo remarked to Carlos, noticing him also inspecting the paintings. "Don't even think about it. How are we going to carry them out?" "Start opening drawers and look for valuables," Carlos ordered. Guillermo donned white cotton gloves and began opening the drawers of the vanity table. There was everything: necklaces, numerous rings, and earrings. Guillermo knew nothing about precious stones, so he grabbed whatever he could lay his hands on. "Hurry up. What are you messing around with over there? Help me out." At that moment, Carlos was sorting through antique figurines that were sitting on the host's dresser. He had a knack for these things, so he began carefully packing them into a travel bag. "Find anything?" he asked Guillermo. "Yeah, trinkets." "Got it all?" "Looks like it." "Then help me out." And Guillermo began to delicately wrap each figurine in soft fabric, as instructed, and pack them into the bag. It only took a few minutes. They discreetly left the host's room with text message cues from Jose. Then they dashed through the garage, making sure the gardener wasn't nearby, and left the same way they had come. "Thanks for showing me the house, buddy," Paulo thanked the manager. Then he turned to Jose. "I hope the appraiser was able to properly assess these apartments?" Jose nodded affirmatively in response. "I'll inform the owners of my decision," he said to the manager, who was closing the gates behind them. "Now, that's a haul," Paulo exclaimed when the partners laid out everything they had managed to find in the host's room. Like a true thief, he knew the value of such items. They settled into their thieves' den, where no one could reach them. It was an abandoned place that had once served as a grocery warehouse. The police never bothered with it because they didn't know it existed. And thieves could comfortably conduct their dark deeds there, knowing no one would find them. There were countless such places in the city. "How are we splitting this?" Carlos asked. "Equally," Paulo replied. "Meaning?" "I'll bring in my appraiser, and then we'll divide everything evenly." "I want to take one ring now," Guillermo said. "You surprise me, Guillermo," Paulo looked at him questioningly. "The appraiser will come, and you'll get your share then." "When will he come?" "Tomorrow night." The next night, the guys divided the catch. Along with his share, Guillermo received what seemed to him the most beautiful ring. It was very delicate with a red gemstone in the middle. "Victoria will love it," he thought. At that moment, he didn't even suspect who it belonged to and what this gift would mean for him. A week later, Guillermo returned to the beach where he usually met Victoria. His heart beat even stronger when he saw the girl approaching him on the sand, her hair gently swaying in the wind, and a smile lighting up her face. Victoria felt her heart beating just as strongly as his. She loved him too, it was undeniable. His kindness, his humor, his ability to see beauty in small things, all of this made her feel special next to him. She didn't need to pretend, she could relax and be herself with him. But she also understood that they could never be together. Their meetings would always be secret. Even Isabella, her best friend, didn't know that every evening Victoria would sneak off to the beach to spend some time with him, with her first love, Guillermo. When they met, the air was filled with tension. They both understood everything. Looking at each other, they remained silent, as if trying to convey their thoughts through their gazes. Then Victoria slowly approached him and took his hand. "Guillermo," she began in a soft voice, "I know we can't be together. But I want you to know that I love you. I love you more than I can express in words." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes, but he smiled at her and hugged her tightly. "And I love you, Victoria. Let me just love you, be with you, and love." They stood there, embracing, feeling time stand still around them. Despite the pain, they knew that their feelings would live on forever, even if they couldn't be together. "My beloved, I have a surprise for you." Guillermo's eyes sparkled as he uttered these words. "Are you going to give me a gift?" asked his girlfriend interestedly. At that moment, the unsuspecting Victoria complied and closed her eyes. She was filled with feelings of pleasure and joy for the upcoming moment. She was often given gifts, but this one was supposed to be special. It was from her beloved. And because of that, the feeling of joy overwhelmed her even more. Open it. Nestled in Guillermo's palm was a beautiful, elegant ring with a red gemstone. How lovely! Victoria couldn't contain her emotions and rushed into Guillermo's embrace. "Try it on." The young man took her hand and attempted to slide it onto the ring finger of her right hand. It fit perfectly. Victoria gazed at him admiringly, but then her expression fell. "I'll accept it, but I can't wear it. My father will have questions." "Do as you see fit. The important thing is that you accept it. As a token of my love." Victoria couldn't wear the ring, but every night before bed, she would twirl it in her hands, examining the gift and thinking of Guillermo. "Looks expensive," the girl thought. "Where did he get the money for such a ring?" "What are you looking at there?" asked Isabella, who was staying overnight with Victoria today. "Oh, nothing much." Victoria hurried to hide the ring in the bedside table, but she didn't make it in time. "Show me." With her usual laughter, Isabella snatched the ring from her friend's hands. "Oh my!" Isabella was speechless. Her round eyes alternated between her friend and the ring. "What's wrong with you?" Victoria asked, confused. "This can't be. Where did you get this?" "Found it on the beach a couple of weeks ago," lied the blonde beauty. "Remember I told you we were robbed about a month ago? This is my mom's stolen ring," exclaimed Isabella. "That can't be," Victoria replied calmly. "We need to check. Do you have a magnifying glass?" Without further ado, Victoria went to her father's study, where she took the magnifying glass and handed it to her friend with a questioning look. "There should be the letter engraved on the inside of the ring. It belonged to my grandmother Adrian, and it was passed down to us along with other family heirlooms. Since the ring is thin, the letter is only visible under magnification." After these words, Isabella took the magnifying glass in her hands. "Look! Just as I said. The letter on the reverse side." "Adrian," triumphed Isabella. "I can't believe you found it. Which beach? How? Why didn't you tell me right away?" As Victoria was bombarded with these questions, a lump formed in her throat. Her thoughts swirled like a storm in her mind, shattering all the previously established confidence. She could barely hold back tears. Could Guillermo really be the thief who robbed her friend's house? Perhaps she herself was just a target? Victoria silently handed the ring to Isabella and said she felt very sleepy. A week passed, and Victoria never showed up at the beach where she used to meet Guillermo every evening. In the initial days, he was filled with worry, thinking something terrible had happened to his beloved. He fretted, battling waves of anxiety, and each time returned to the beach hoping to see her familiar figure. But gradually, the puzzle in his mind came together. He began to understand that her absence was not accidental. The world she lived in did not allow her to be with him, a regular guy who didn't even have a home. He realized that the social inequality that had always been between them was the barrier she couldn't overcome. Guillermo felt his heart breaking into pieces. He tried to console himself with the thought that it was better for her, that she deserved better than he could offer. But the painful emptiness inside him didn't subside, reminding him of her absence. He continued to return to the beach every evening, despite the pain and disappointment. The place where they used to meet was like a sanctuary to him, where he could feel her presence, even if she was far away. And in this silence and solitude, sitting on the sand, Guillermo realized that his feelings for her would never fade. He loved her more than he could imagine, and even if they couldn't be together, his heart would always be with her. Victoria stood by the window of her luxurious room, her gaze lost. Her mind screamed at her that Guillermo was a thief and a liar, that he would never be worthy of her love and trust. But her heart didn't listen to reason. It always returned to those moments they spent together. Every day, Victoria remembered their meetings on the shore. The sounds of the sea, the cool breeze that caressed her skin, and most importantly, his warm touch. She remembered their first kiss, full of passion and tenderness, which made her heart beat faster. She understood that she shouldn't have trusted him, that he could have used her to achieve his goals. But even in the darkest moments of doubt, when she felt like everything was falling apart, she couldn't deny her feelings for him. Looking out the window, she realized that even if they could never be together, his love would remain in her heart forever. Neither she nor time could erase the memories of what they shared, of how he loved her, and how she loved him. Another month had passed. Guillermo had almost sold his entire loot share. There was enough money to get himself fake documents, which was exactly what he aimed for, as with documents, he could now find a job. Guillermo, seriously? Carlos laughed. I make more in a day than you would in a month. I want to learn to live right, Guillermo proudly replied. Well, good luck. But know that Paulinho won't take you back. He let you go only because you took that risky job. Carlos patted his friend on the shoulder, not believing he would succeed. But Guillermo did. He started working as a porter at the port. The money was scarce, but it was honest money. Sometimes the work was so hard that thoughts of returning to the life of crime crossed his mind, where he could get quick and easy money. But then, thoughts of Victoria and the bright part of his soul she had illuminated would resurface in his mind. Remembering their meetings on the seashore, Guillermo understood that he couldn't afford to plunge back into the dark waters of crime. His love for Victoria gave him the strength to keep fighting, even when everything seemed hopeless. He knew he had to become better, even if he never saw her again. His love for her was a beacon guiding him through life's stormy seas. When Guillermo had weekends, which was rare, he always headed to that same beach, to their secret spot where they had met Victoria a year ago. It was a place where time seemed to stand still, where he could feel her presence even if she was far away. He came here every time hoping to see her, hear her laughter, catch her scent on the wind. But the blonde beauty was nowhere to be found. The sand was empty, and the sea seemed much colder now without her presence. His heart ached, and he prayed to see her again, even if just for a moment. In these moments of sorrow, he would close his eyes and remember every detail of her face, every word she said, every moment they spent together. His memories of her were like a light in the darkness, sustaining him through the toughest times. On this evening, when Guillermo came to the beach again, he didn't even hope to see her anymore. There were few people around, and as the sun set, the beach became even quieter and emptier. He stood on the shore, staring into the dark expanse of water, and again, he remembered. But suddenly something pulled him out of this colorful world of fantasies. It was a woman's scream, abruptly cut off. Guillermo saw a figure frantically waving hands in the sea. Without hesitation, he plunged into the water. The force of the waves pushed him back to shore, but Guillermo fought against them, swimming to the right spot. As he approached, he saw a girl overtaken by a wave and drowning. Without a second thought, he grabbed her and began dragging her to the shore. It was difficult, the current pulling Guillermo back into the sea, but he fought against it as if his life depended on it. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst from his chest. But he didn't stop, despite the fatigue and strain. Finally, he reached the shore, pulling the girl onto dry land. He lay on the sand, his strength leaving him, but he was happy. He had saved a stranger, without considering the consequences, because it was the only thing that mattered in that moment, to save a life. He closed his eyes, still not understanding whom he had saved. They need to be taken to the hospital urgently. Guillermo began to come to his senses slowly. He vaguely saw several people surrounding him. They all seemed familiar, but their faces were blurry, as if mixed in a kaleidoscope of memories. At the center of attention was an agitated man in his 50s. He was shouting something, but the sound seemed distant and indistinct. Guillermo tried to object, to get up, to say that he didn't need the hospital, that he couldn't afford it. But his body seemed disconnected from his will, and he couldn't move. He felt the drowsiness enveloping him again, as if he were sinking into an abyss of dreams. And there he was again, on the beach, in that world of dreams, where his desires became reality. And then, out of nowhere, she appeared to Victoria. Her beauty was dazzling, and her smile set his heart dancing madly. He couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't believe that his wish to see her again had come true. Guillermo woke up in the hospital. Why did they bring me here? I managed to get out, catch my breath, and could have moved on. Now I'll never be able to repay for this medical care, he thought. At that moment, a nurse entered. As soon as she saw Guillermo awake, she rushed out into the corridor and called for Senor Paula. The man in his 50s, whom Guillermo had seen earlier, entered the room. Now Guillermo could see him clearly. He immediately recognized the mayor of the city. You saved my daughter, risking your own life, the man said, his voice trembling. I will cover your hospital expenses, don't worry about that. And, in fact, ask for whatever you want. Guillermo didn't respond. He was still in a dazed state, vaguely aware of what was happening. Paula noticed this and tried to comfort him. It's all behind you now. What's your name? Guillermo. Guillermo, I would be very pleased if you had lunch with me and my daughter at our house. I want to thank you. And we'll discuss what reward you want. I can't come to your house, it's impossible, Guillermo worried. I know how to be grateful and appreciate people who risk their lives for others. You should stay under the observation of doctors for another day, and tomorrow my driver will pick you up. Agreed? The next day, Guillermo got into an expensive car. All night and all morning he had been thinking about the upcoming lunch. He didn't know what to ask the mayor for. Money? A job? The only thing he dreamed of was to see her. But the mayor was no magician. When Guillermo stepped out of the car and glanced at the mansion, he couldn't believe his eyes. The very first time he met Victoria, he escorted her to this mansion. It can't be, he thought, is she the mayor's daughter? Did I save Victoria? Or did they sell this house and now it belongs to the mayor? A million thoughts spun in the head of the 17-year-old boy. Come in, Guillermo, Senor Paulo greeted him joyfully and led him to the table. Thank you. Don't be shy. The savior of my daughter is the most honored guest in this house. Take a seat. My daughter will join us shortly. She also wants to thank you. What's her name? The boy asked, but before he could hear the answer, the dining room door swung open, and he saw her, the fair-haired beauty he had seen every day in his dreams. His heart raced as he saw Victoria. She stood there as if she had come from his most cherished dreams. Her hair sparkled in the light, and her eyes radiated a glow that seemed to illuminate the whole world around her. Guillermo, this is my daughter, Victoria, Senor Paulo introduced her. Guillermo could barely contain his excitement as Victoria approached him. He felt his heart beating so hard it seemed ready to leap out of his chest. In that moment, all his doubts, all his fears dissolved into the air. His dreams had become reality, and Victoria stood before him, a symbol of his hopes and love. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She clearly hadn't expected to see him here. Her first love. The person she had thought about every day, every second. Victoria, I've been waiting for you. Pleasure to meet you, Guillermo. My father told me you saved me risking your life, the girl said through tears, pretending to see the young man for the first time. Guillermo decided that either she had forgotten him, or she simply didn't want to delve into details in front of her father. Guillermo, tell us about your life. What do you do? The mayor asked, and the boy began his story. He told them that he used to steal before, but now he earns money working at the port. He told them about his parents and his tough life. Without hiding anything, he recounted how he agreed to steal the expensive mansion to get money for fake documents. He told them everything, except for the identity of the girl he loved and the house he stole. The mayor was shocked by the boy's difficult fate. He felt the pain Guillermo spoke of. Have you ever wanted to return to the thieves' gang? I did, the guy admitted, but every time I remembered her. That girl. Somehow, thoughts of her gave me strength. Ah, that first love. The mayor smiled. And what education do you have? 4 years in school. Not bad already. I think I know how I can repay you for saving my daughter. Paolo's face expressed complete satisfaction. He finally figured out how he could thank Guillermo. Sir Paolo, I don't need anything. There will be a spare spot for you at the Guadalupe College, so you can choose a specialty you like. I'll take care of everything. At that moment, Guillermo felt a sense of euphoria. Could it be that what he had dreamed of had come true? Firstly, he saw her again. And secondly, he would receive an education. Dad, can I show Guillermo our garden? As lunch was nearing its logical conclusion, Victoria took the initiative. They went out into the garden. The girl turned to Guillermo and looked into his eyes for a long time. They were silent, and then Guillermo said, I came to the beach every time hoping to see you. And I flew to Europe to never accidentally see you. Victoria, but why? You gave me a stolen ring. It's Isabel's mother's ring. Your gang robbed their house. Though what difference does it make? The girl burst into tears. She had kept her emotions in check for a long time, but now, being alone with him, she could finally say everything. I hate you so much. You broke my heart. I thought you were using me to rob us too. That's not true, Guillermo said quietly, carefully wiping the tears from her cheek. Now you know the truth. There's no lying in what I told your father. I love you, Victoria. I love you too, Guillermo. The girl kissed him on the lips. Their kiss was soft, full of reconciliation and hope for the future. At that moment, they both felt the walls between them crumbling, their feelings becoming clear and true. They may not have known what lay ahead, but now they were together, and that was all they needed. In that garden, in each other's arms, they found peace and true happiness, which they had long sought. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please support the video by liking it and leaving a comment. Thank you very much.